right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all very much for being here today. It's a great way to start the beginning of the new year to celebrate and formalize some of the work that we've done together, the administration and the council. So I'd like to recognize Councilwoman Nicole George, who's with us here today. And then we'll be hearing from Councilman Marcus Winkler and Bill Hollander here shortly as well. So thank you all for all the great work that has gone together to make this happen here today and for these announcements. So to that end, I will be signing two ordinances this afternoon, both approved by the council at the end of the year. The first is an amended mid-year spending adjustment of $24.8 million that allows us to address some of the big challenges that we have. Metro government is not immune from what's being called the Great Resignation that we're seeing around the country, where all types of businesses are having problems staffing appropriately. So we'll be using some of this $24.8 million to address some critical staffing challenges throughout Metro, with focus on our public safety agencies in particular. We have an aging fleet. I'm sure you've noticed that when you look at it. And Director Vanessa Burns is here with us today. Thank you, Vanessa, for your good work. But the amount of time it takes to repair our fleet right now is just not working. So these big vehicles in particular are kept off the street way too long. We're going to add some canine patrols at the Metro Jail, which is an exciting new program I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And then we're going to hire some additional zoning enforcement officers to making sure that all of our codes and regs are being followed properly around the city. Now, this funding, as you'll recall, comes from savings from agency operations, monies that have not been spent by our departments, and unanticipated revenue growth in fiscal year 21. We had a realistic revenue budget going into the year, but we came out of the recession that was caused by the pandemic much quicker than experts predicted, and so we're thankful for that additional revenue. We also have $5 million from our share of the American Rescue Plan that's included as part of the $24.8 million. So specifically what we're talking about here is $12.5 million in wage adjustments to stabilize our workforce. We're hoping to bring wages across Metro closer to where the private market is. We also are hoping these changes will really help us with our public safety agencies, and you've seen some dramatic new contracts with some of our public safety agencies, our police department in particular. There's also $5 million for incentives to attract new applicants to critical public safety positions. So you'll be hearing more about that in the coming month or so. So corrections is an area that we're challenged with right now, and then also making sure we have full cadet classes at the police department is important. We're spending $72,000 to add 2 canine patrols to the jail. We want to do that to help us better locate and remove any illegal substances. People are scanned when they come into the jail, but there's various ways that contraband can get in jails, whether it's here or anywhere in the country. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything possible to avert that from happening. $172,500 is going toward the new zoning officers that I mentioned. And there's also $5.7 million to boost Metro's fleet, primarily by replacing outdated sanitation equipment and dump trucks. So that's critical, as I talked about, and especially now we're thinking about a snow event here this week. We want to make sure that we've got everything we can out rolling on the streets. We won't have these new trucks in time for that, but it just accentuates why we need them. Now, the ordinance also sets aside $1.5 million in matching funds for a potential federal Build Back Better regional challenge grant that could be worth up to $50 million. So our city is seeking that with 8 local partners. It's around digital health. Louisville is a leader in wellness and aging care in the country. So this particular grant would go to innovation in that area. And that grant is designed to assist communities all across the country like ours in accelerating our economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, and then to help us build economic strength against future shocks. We got some great news last month. There are about 600 or so applications for this grant, and we're now one of 50 or 60 cities that made the cut. And then we'll find out here in the coming months whether or not we get up to this $50 million. But that could be a really impactful grant for us here and further solidify our position as the leader in the country in wellness and aging innovation. So altogether, this budget ordinance is going to help us retain and attract quality employees, especially, we hope, in our overstretched public safety agencies, and allow us to keep providing the type of quality city services that our residents expect and deserve. You'll see that we just had to make an announcement early this week about stopping yard waste pickup because of the decline in numbers that we have in public works, but also the COVID impact that we're having. So when you get those two things together, it's just hard to deliver the type of services that we've grown accustomed to and that we think our citizens deserve. This announcement and all this development would not happen if we didn't have a great relationship with the Council Budget Committee, and specifically Council Budget Chair Bill Hollander works relentlessly on these issues, has for many years as Budget Chair. So Bill's representation of the Council in these deliberations is something that is really, really appreciated because there's a lot of nuance to getting this stuff correct, both from a citywide basis and then when we go and start talking about the needs of all 26 of our Metro Council districts. So, Councilman Hollander, Chair Hollander, if you could add a few thoughts, we certainly would appreciate that. Bill Hollander.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you everyone for being here. We worked very well with the administration and with all council members, as passed unanimously at council at our last meeting of the year. I would just emphasize what the mayor said about our workforce. We have balanced the budget in the last few years by having significantly fewer workers across Metro government. Those workers are working harder, and as we've seen the so-called Great Resignation, our salaries have not been keeping up with the market. So what we did with this budget surplus at the end of last year is reserve most of it for salary increases. I think that's just really critical that we are paying people what they deserve so that we can hire good people and we can continue to provide city services. I'll make one other comment. I know Councilman Winkler is going to speak about the incentives for bringing in more public safety workers, which is very important. The other piece that we did with American Rescue Plan funds was to restrict $15 million for fiscal year 23 to balance that budget based on what our current forecasts are. I think that's a conservative thing to do. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad that the council went along with that. The salary increases that we have granted to LMPD and other agencies and that we hope will happen in the near future through this budget adjustment are going to cost in the long term for the city. But you get what you pay for in terms of city workers, and we get what we pay for in terms of city services, and our residents deserve those kinds of services. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you for working with us on this, and we look forward to continuing work in the next year.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate that. Marcus Winkler is with us also, and he is going to share a few words with us about these measures. Councilman.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to first start by echoing Councilman Hollander's comments about the process and the work in partnership with the administration, and really commend your team first and foremost. I think it'd be easy, as you're approaching the end of the term, to make decisions that don't necessarily set the city up for long-term success and potentially create a long-term budget problem. And having been in the conversation with both you and Monica Harmon, the CFO for the city, I can say that that's categorically not what's happened. I mean, your team has been very responsible in terms of long-term planning and making sure that we're on the right foot going forward, not just this year or the year following, as Councilman Hollander alluded to with the $15 million set aside, but even beyond. And so I would compliment you and your team on that approach. As Councilman Hollander said, making sure that we're paying our workers appropriately is one of the key things. I mean, our economy locally and nationally are booming. Jobs are plentiful everywhere, and pay is going up across the board. And I think we're moving in the right direction, both in critical public safety areas with the new FOP contract, which should help address pay issues there, as well as the additional $15 million that we've put aside in the budget now for additional pay. The part I want to talk about specifically, though, is the money that the mayor mentioned on recruitment incentives across our public safety agencies. So I know the administration is going to be working on the details of the program, but we've got critical staffing shortages at corrections, at LMPD, and other public safety agencies. And using this money to very quickly recruit people that will help fill these gaps, I think, is critical. We've got capacity constraints in our recruiting classes that in order to get back to full strength, being able to do that quickly, I think, is paramount. And I'm optimistic that this money will help us get there and address the number one need the number one obligation that we have as public servants as it relates to public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Now I want to talk about a second ordinance here that we'll be signing today, and it's all about amnesty. One, it's going to help us reduce the number of abandoned vehicles on our roadways by reducing crowding at our city's impound lot. So this has been a challenge for quite some time here in the city, so this is one of the innovative ways that we're dealing with this by creating this amnesty program. This ordinance gives our Public Works Director, Vanessa Burns, the ability to declare an amnesty period not to exceed 30 days in which all towing and storage fees are waived for those picking up their vehicles from the impound lot. So this measure should eliminate any financial barrier that may be contributing to crowding at the impound lot where somebody says, I just can't afford to pick up my vehicle. And it's just one way that we're working to address this issue of abandoned cars on our streets. Just last week, we announced a very exciting, creative idea with a new auction lot for the Louisville Metro Police Department. And this move will cut the number of vehicles at the existing impound lot and allow us to hold in-person auctions twice monthly, so we can just move more quickly these vehicles at the impound lot. There is discussion in the community about this approach, so it's important that we hear from everybody. And I want to remind residents that there's a public meeting about that plan for the auction lot on Wednesday, January 19th at 1 o'clock at 514 West Liberty Street. And then there's a virtual option too, so you can check that out by going to louisvilleky.gov. So I urge people to participate in that process and weigh in on the need to get abandoned vehicles off the streets. And if you have different ideas than what we've come up with, please share those with us as well. Now, you'll note that each of these ordinances here today are meant to address the number one priority of this administration and our council, and I think most everybody in our city, and that's public safety. So I appreciate the council's partnership on all of this, and I want to thank LMPD, specifically Major Emily McKinley, who's with us here today for their work on this measure. Under Major McKinley's purview is the impound lot, and the auction lot will be there, and these various programs, in addition to a lot of other stuff that she has going on. So, Major, I'd like to thank you very much for your help on this. All right. One final note before we sign these resolutions, that today is a very special day because our Director of Intergovernment Relations for the Metro Council, it is her birthday today. Wanda Mitchell-Smith. Please stand and be recognized there. Thank you very much, Wanda. Wanda is vital glue to us to keep the relationship and the communication just going back and forth across the street 24/7. And her experience legislatively, her experience relationally is just really valued by, I know, our team here in the mayor's office, and I think I can say on behalf of the Metro Council, it's valued by them as well. So happy birthday, young lady. We appreciate you. All right. So why don't you come up on it while we sign the resolution? Is it legal, Ellen, if she signs one of them, is that okay? She don't want that trouble. Council folks, would you all like to come up? Major, Vanessa? Gotcha. All right, so this first ordinance is ordinance number 197. So this is the ordinance with all the year-end budget adjustments that we just spoke about moments ago. So we're thankful for having almost a $25 million year-end to the positive that we can put to good work here in the city. So again, I'd like to thank our council partners for making this happen. And that is now law for the city. Going from $25 million to addressing a perennial challenge here over the last year or so has been the need to get more of abandoned vehicles off of the street. So this ordinance number 198 will do that by providing for a 30-day amnesty period where people can have their fees waived and get their cars back from the impound lot. So we'll sign that. That is now law as well. All right, thank you all. Any questions?
Real quick, the amnesty thing, is that just like a once-a-year thing, or just whenever it's deemed necessary?
Well, we have 30 days in total. Or Emily, you want to explain how it works? Major? Sorry.
So yes, we have 30 days within a calendar year. So we're going to look at our calendars and look at our inventory and try to select the most appropriate time. So it might be a week period at a time. It could be up to a 30-day period. So we have 30 days within a calendar year.
So it might not necessarily be 30 days straight in a row. It might be 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there kind of thing?
Correct.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you all for covering this. Stay safe, stay warm.